Welcome back, everybody. Here's the associates here in Toronto. We're here
Episode
with
three.
David and Jean-Michel. So I just wanted to wish you guys everyone a happy new year and thanks for keeping with us and staying and being our viewers.
Happy New Year. How was the holidays?
No, it was great. Honestly, I mean, I'm still a little tired. I got a family, so two kids. I was honestly I was looking for my mic for the last hour since before this podcast because I don't remember where I put it. So I've been looking. I put the whole house upside down. So, but I found it, so everything's good now. But yeah, I guess let's get into it. So I saw you sent me over a report with the rent. It looks like everything's kind of topped out for rent, right? Is
It
that what it
looks
is?
like it. I mean, it looks like it. I think, rent last year ended up year over year in November was up 8.9%. But it looks like rent's starting to finally, somewhat stabilize across. That's just not in Toronto. That's across the entire country.
For sure. I mean, look, I have a rental property up in downtown Toronto with the water view, and it's furnished, and we're sitting there, and we're not getting any showings or anything. So it's just like I'm noticing you have a lot more option now as a renter than you did before. But I do see that the landlords are very, very picky when it comes to picking a tenant.
Right. Right. That's the one on Queens Quay, you know?
Yeah, the Queen's Key condo. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a
Yeah.
nice condo. It's a nice little one bedroom. It's a good size, and you're facing the water, so it's really nice. But again, like we had some people call us and reach out to us, but it's just, it's just not the best applications to be honest. But
Yeah. Did you see that report that since July, there's been a 40% decrease in student visa applications from India?
yes, yeah,
40%.
yeah,
So I think that's driving a lot of the if you want to call it stability in the rental market right now.
for
But I
sure. I
also
mean,
but I also
for,
think if you look at, rent prices going up, 10%, oh, just last year and more than that in the last few, I think the market is, just reaching that boiling point right now.
for sure. I mean, what's an average one bedroom going these days in downtown? Like 2,500,
Without
2,600?
parking,
Yeah,
if you want parking, I think a nice one bedroom, like something that's not going to be, a generic cookie cutter one bedroom, you're in the $3,000 range to start.
for, yeah, that's
Like
crazy.
for a nice one bedroom. You can pick up like an average 500 square foot, something that maybe doesn't have a great view, maybe it's a little out of the way, so to speak, for about 2,500. But yeah, I mean, you see that basement apartments are 1,900 $1,900 for a one bedroom basement apartment.
And even the basement apartments, landlords are really picky on who they're letting in and stuff. It's just insane. Like before I used to have clients that would reach out for rentals and they would tell me what they want and things like that. And we would start looking and things would go well. But we started applying and landlords start saying no. And then like we had to go to last resort basements. And even the basement landlords, they're just very picky. It's just getting insane. The amount of documents they ask for you, it's harder to get a rental than it is to get a mortgage. Let's just put it there.
Look at the laws here in Ontario.
Yeah.
We joke about how once the tenant moves in, they own the house. And that's basically how it is. So
I'm, yeah. I mean, I think to solve that problem, I think the tribunal needs to maybe lay off on some of the rules or kind of like tone it down a little bit. Because I feel like if it was easier to, kick somebody out because they're not paying or they're doing something bad, then you wouldn't have this problem where you got to put up a year's rent up front or offer a year's rent up front. It's just insane. Like I just don't understand how they can keep doing this. It just like you said, like once the tenant goes in, they own the property. They do whatever they want. You can't kick them out. It takes a year because you got to take them to court.
so I am a believer that there does need to be some regulation because we've talked about this. You're going to have these scum lords out there that are, throwing out single moms on Christmas Eve because they're, a few weeks late on rent. There should be
No,
regulations
100%.
and rules. I think it's gone a little bit too far in that direction.
Well, I just think it's like I don't disagree with you. I think there should be rules, but the rules can't be as strict as they are. They need to loosen up on them. It just doesn't make sense that someone doesn't pay your rent for 6 months and they're still living in your place for free and that you're going to court. It's just insane. I don't know. I've heard some
Look,
horror stories and it's just, makes I can understand why there's a lot of investors just getting out of this residential rental market.
look at some of the stories you hear about, you know, tenant that's been in the same property for 5 years, 10 years, longer. The landlord wants to be a good person because that tenant has been paying the rent. We've seen those cases
Oh yeah,
where
I've dealt
it
with a lot of those cases,
it, it
100%.
ultimately ends up hurting the landlord in the end. because if you don't continue to raise the rent of your tenant, it, with how far and how fast the rental market has increased, these tenants are never going to go anywhere. And now, if that's strictly an investment property and you don't live there, it may be very difficult for you to now sell that property. I've seen cases where I've represented buyers on tenanted properties, and sellers don't want to put a vacant possession clause in with the agreement because they're not confident that that tenant's going to move out on closing day. So
I've been the opposite. I've dealt with the seller side, and it's not any funner. So it's just it's a tough situation for sure. Um, but hopefully it gets better. I mean, like, with the more inventory coming up, there might be, a little more relaxation on the landlords. They might be a little more open to taking people in, or, they'll start selling their properties, which would give us more inventory in the long run, right?
but I wonder how much of this cooling off in the rental market has to do with a lot of potential renters that are maybe deciding that they're going to hold off and maybe look at buying something in
Yeah.
2024, if rates do come down. So I mean, we got the first Bank of Canada announcement January 24th.
Yeah.
What's your call? What are you thinking?
Oh man, it's tough. I don't I think they're gonna hold. I don't think they're gonna do anything. I think they're gonna hold as is. And I think the March 6th date, they might see a decrease, I think.
March?
March, I think.
Yeah,
That might be premature. I don't know. It's tough to say. You never know with the Bank of Canada. It just doesn't make sense. But a lot of people are hurting, and a lot of things seem to be going under. So I just feel like they've done what they aim to do, is to break something in the economy, and it looks like that's what they did, and it just doesn't make sense to keep going. I
so
don't,
I was looking at unemployment numbers since April of last year. So
yeah,
April of last year was the unemployment number in Canada was 5%.
yeah,
So that's jumped up to 5.8% up until last month. The unemployment numbers just came out.
yeah.
So I think that's probably what the Bank of Canada was looking for, was to see, some liquidity come out of the marketplace, and that translates to job losses and, you know, um, hopefully a lowering of inflation. But inflation
Well,
came out a couple weeks ago, 3.1% unchanged. So what are
that's
your
true. But
thoughts?
I mean, I also read an article saying that, like, if they didn't introduce the new carbon tax, that we would be much closer to the 2% that we would add. I
Sure,
think I think the carbon tax probably added 0.6% in the inflation for
sure.
the
It's a tax
years.
on everything.
Yeah,
It's
pretty
a
much.
tax literally on everything, on your
It's a
transportation, on
ton.
your food,
Yeah.
on everything. So,
But
we can
the
go,
only thing that hasn't caught up with us is employment, right? Like salaries haven't gotten in, like haven't we haven't seen a huge increase in salaries yet, which is the next step in this economy, right? Because like as everything's going up, everyone's going to start asking for raises and everything's going to go up. You're going to start seeing salaries go up, right? That's usually the next step in this certain cycle when it comes to inflation.
that's inflationary in itself, isn't it?
Well, yeah, but I mean, it's funny because I was talking to a client who owned a property. He was like, inflation is great because, you own a property, your payments go up, and then you start to live with that payment, right? But then you go to work and then you get that raise that you've been waiting for, and now that payment and then things start to kind of settle back down, and then you make more money, and you have a smaller interest rates down, right? So it's kind of this cycle where it's like it's hard to, I don't know how to explain it because he went through it really fast with me, but it's like it kind of made sense. And I was like, I get that. Yeah, because it's kind of like we're going into a recession, things are going to go down, everyone's going to start saving money, but then you're going to start getting these increases in salaries, and it's going to kind of juice up the economy, right?
But one of the things I heard was during COVID, the Canadian consumer, on average, their savings significantly increased. So you look at not just people on variable rates, but anybody that is now renewing over the last 12 months and moving forward, they're talking about 30-40% increases in your mortgage payment. So, you know, how long can the average Canadian hold on if unemployment continues to increase? I mean, the buyers I'm working with right now are people, they're not investors. They're people that need a place to live. They're tenants, and they're looking at this as an opportunity, with the forecasting of interest rates coming down. We've already seen that significantly with fixed rates. They've come down a lot since
Well, I mean,
October
the bonds
last
come
year.
down. Now we're seeing interest rates under 5%, right? Like I think we're
What are
starting to,
bonds at right now? 3.3, 3.4%?
Yeah, something like that, 3.3, I believe. But the fixed rate, if we just take a look real quick, sorry, I had it open and I closed it. Fixed rates, you can get some with not like the major banks. The major banks are still pretty high, but under a million, if you were going to get insured, you can get like 4.89,
Right.
which is we're back to almost what it was at the beginning of last year, right?
I think it's a huge help for a lot of households.
Yeah,
I know some clients of mine, I know some friends of mine that renewed in Q3, Q4 of last year. Mostly it was the end of Q3, like September-ish, and they were renewing at 6.5. Some people are paying a lot more than that.
yeah.
I had a client,
2% drop is huge, right? Like,
big, it's massive. I had a clients that bought with me in October of 2022, and they really don't want to buy a house, but the wife was self-employed at the time,
yeah,
and she didn't have 2 full years of statements, T1
yeah,
generals, and they had to go they had to go to a B lender, and at the time their rate was 6.18 was the interest rate that they got, and at the time everybody else was getting rates in the low fours, the high threes, so that seemed like a massive difference. And now they're looking at a renewal coming up in October of this year because it was a 2-year term. And, now the wife's going to have 2 full years. So they're actually going to go from a B lender with a significantly higher interest rate to probably something, most likely in the fours, mid fours, high fours. So see what
I think it's
happens.
going to look good for the spring market. I think we might see a little uptick, hopefully. I mean, like as long as there's good news, if they do increase the interest rates come January, I think we're in for a very, very bad year. I think that if they do increase it, I think we're in bad
I
in
don't,
some deep water.
I don't see a scenario where they raise rates again. I mean, it could happen. Could happen. If something drastic happens with inflation and it comes back. But the US is going into an election year this year.
Yeah,
There's gonna be an election in November. As much as people say that central banks are supposed to, not be political, I believe they are. And then the question is, when do they start cutting? How far do they cut rates? And then what's happening with the economy? What's happening with the labor market? Can people not only can they afford to buy property, but do they have the appetite based on that, what else is happening in the world and in their lives?
for sure.
So
So what are your predictions for 2024?
yeah, so I think it's gonna be better year than 2023 in terms of
Okay.
volume. I believe average sale prices will be up in comparison to 2023. We looked
Okay.
at those numbers,
Yeah.
those spreadsheets that we shared. So January of 2023 was the 10th worst volume for sales ever on Treb,
Yeah.
going back all the way to 1999. So
Which is crazy because
you
like
got
how
the
many
numbers in
people
front of
live
you.
here, right?
I,
Yeah, no, I'm
I,
looking
I,
at them right now.
I'm pretty sure January of last year, there were 3,083 sales, right?
And right under that is December of 2022. So it's not so it's pretty much one like 2 months back to back of the lowest sales since 99 or 96. I see the lowest date on
So,
here is
so
96.
read out what was the lowest month and what was
Lowest month
the lowest
ever.
sales? It was in 99,
Yeah, January 99 for 2533.
2533.
Yeah, that was 2533. And then January 2023 was 3083. But I mean, the sales volume, like the dollar amount, is significantly more
So I
in
think it's
January.
about 5 times more. So I think in 99,
Almost six times. It was
I think
like
the average price in 99 was two and change, 256,
211. Yeah, 211. And
211.
then the total volume for January was 536 million. Okay.
And
I'm guessing you probably have an idea of what January 2023 was.
you know what else is interesting when you look at those stats?
Yeah.
Look at the lowest months on record and look at the sale price to list price ratio and then compare that to the highest years or the highest month, sorry.
Sales
Back in the
to-
90s, early 2000s,
Yeah.
people were getting discounts on average off the asking price.
Oh, yeah. You're saying here at the end where it says 96%, 94%.
Yeah, it's only been in the last like, 10 years, maybe a
Yeah.
little longer that we've had this whole kind of bidding war, sellers pricing, you price the property purposely low, you get a bunch of you hopefully get multiple offers and it drives the price up. So where do we go from here?
Well, I think you're right. I think it's like it's been since what 2015 that we started seeing these multiple offers come in, and like looks like 2015 June was like the first time like it was above 100%, and then every other time after that, which when we're talking about high volume months, right? Everything after that is like I guess the highest one, which is crazy, which is March 2017 when that whole craziness happened. The average sale was 111% over asking. That's what they were averagely selling for.
Crazy.
That's insane.
It's crazy.
You think we're gonna see that again? Like, do you think with what's going on in the
No.
market, you'll see that again in 2024? No,
No, no, no, no, no, no. I don't think so.
2025.
No, I mean, look at what's happening right now. Look at what's happening. A lot of sellers are still pricing their homes with, offers anytime, which just means that if the home is worth, if the neighbors have sold for 1 million, you're going to price it at 1 million. You'll review offers anytime, and like I said, we'll see what happens from here. I mean, those are my predictions, though, and I've said that I think in episode 2. Higher volume in sales. I don't know how it could be lower than 2023
I
at
mean,
a higher average price.
it could. Like, if interest rates keep going up, but for some reason the bond yields turn around and start
I
going
think
up,
they're
like,
done though. I really believe they're done with interest rate hikes. I mean, think
wow,
about the year that we had, starting in 2022, when we had, in the summer of 2022, we had a 1% increase
which was the
in,
highest I think
in one meeting.
since the 90s, right? Yeah, that was
We
like the
had
highest.
it was the highest and quickest rate hike cycle in Canadian history.
Right, yeah.
So, now everybody wants to know when a rate's going to come down. Sometime this year. A lot of people are predicting March, like you said, March or April. Some people are predicting Q3. It's the prediction game is,
I
you know,
do think that, if they do start decreasing these interest rates or keep holding them and, fixed rates keep coming down, I do think we might see maybe a spring might be a little, busier than normal. Summer might, be average, and then the fall, I think we'll see a very busy fall this year.
you think so?
I think so because it's gonna, there's a cooped up like there's a lot of buyers that are just sitting there waiting to see what happens. Like I talk to buyers, some buyers are still thinking we're gonna get another 20% decrease when we've already had a 20% drop in price, right? I don't
Mhm.
see another 20%. We live in Toronto, we have a housing problem. There's millions of people moving here every single year, and there's not enough homes. So at some point we're gonna hit a plateau, which could be now, but I prices are still coming down. I think there's still some areas that have been overinflated and they're slowly coming down. And I think as time goes on, they're gonna get corrected just like every other area in Toronto or the GTA.
905's been like the Durham region,
Oh,
been getting hit really, really, really hard,
oh
you
yeah,
know?
100%.
And I think right now, if I was someone who had a stable income, let's say you got a couple and one of them works for the government, you got a teacher and the other one has like I'm talking about people that have security in their jobs and you're renters and you've saved up a little bit of a nest egg. I think my goal would be to try to find something as close to Toronto, you know, as possible. Because
Yeah.
ultimately, the further you start going away from the city, and like I said, we're starting to see that in places like Durham. Barrie already saw that much longer, much before Durham region saw that as well. So, I think proximity to Toronto is always going to be something that's important. And again, I think most buyers that are out there shopping right now, they're looking at this from a perspective of, I need a house. I need a house. I don't have to compete with a ton of other people, and I can actually negotiate a little bit and try to get a good deal. And I think as realtors, sometimes because we live through this every single day, sometimes we think that every single home buyer out there is always just looking at returns and what type of an investment is going to be, when that's not always the case. A lot of people just want a home, you
No,
know.
100%. I think, like if you're looking, I would just recommend to investors who are looking to buy and flip in a year, you're probably better off holding off because I don't think is a good time. You're not gonna make money in that. But if
It's
you're,
always a risky game.
yeah, because I mean, how many people do you know got caught in that when well, I guess you can see them all on MLS. They're all like sitting there, you see what they bought it for, and they're selling for the same price, and it's completely renovated too, right? So it's a little crazy when it comes down to playing that flipping game, especially, in a down market like this. But, if you're buying something and gonna hold it for 5, 6 years or 10 years, you can't go wrong. It's just houses, where the amount of immigration they're letting into the country, the amount of people that we're having, nothing's going to stop the prices of going up. Like, you know, like when you say, you know, oh,
Unless
we
we have
want
a
more.
financial crisis, unless we
Yeah,
have
right.
this debt bomb that everybody keeps talking about, this currency crisis and devaluation and, you know, hyperinflation, a lot could still go very, very wrong. We've just never
Right.
really, we haven't seen it in Toronto. We haven't really seen that in a long time, since the late 80s. And we, you know, 2017, post
Well, I mean, like,
COVID.
just look at China, how they, what's going on with their economy right now. I mean, you sent me that thing about them, right? So it's like their youth unemployment is super up, right? It's like there's all these companies that like their real estate companies, their biggest one, what Evergreen, just went like
Evergrande, yeah.
yeah, Evergrande, they're just going under, and it's like everything they built, and like these people can't get out of those mortgages they got to. They have to still pay for it, and they don't even have a house.
But I feel like this is just a symptom of markets. When times are good, people get greedy, and it has a people have a tendency, and the market has a tendency of going too far in one direction. From what I saw, the stock market's really pulled back in the new year, like just in the last few days.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Stock market's had a
Dropped quite
big
a bit.
big pullback. And I'm not
Yeah.
an economist. I'm not a, you know, I'm not a financial expert or anything like that. But I keep my eyes open. I look at what's happening as much as I can.
Which
So
ones are you looking at?
what's that?
Which stocks are you looking at?
So I mean, I had a little bit of Apple stock. I sold it.
Yeah.
So, but so every now and then I take a look at what's happening. Apple pulled back, I think, like 5% last week,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
just in the last few days.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's
Bitcoin's
also
going like
Shopify, which is like Canadian as well, and that dropped like 10% in the last 2 days. It dropped like yeah, almost 10%. It's
a lot of the
crazy.
tech stocks had massive years in 2023. I think the S&P was up 15% last year. So it
Mhm.
was like a huge gain. Stocks like Nvidia, they make
Oh, Nvidia
chips.
is just
In
skyrocketing.
Nvidia went up like crazy. So I
Went
think
up like 1,200%.
people want to invest, and
Yeah.
people want to make their money work for them. Um, but again, I think there's a tendency of, like, you know, fear of missing out. We saw the same thing happen with pre-con. You know, your buddy bought a place, your neighbors bought a place, pre-construction. They flipped it in 2 or 3 years. They tripled their deposit. They had no mortgage payments coming out, other than that money that was just, you know, kind of sitting with the in this developer trust account. And then all of a sudden, the market changed. You know,
Well, you know what I find funny about these trends, you know, when it comes to those like new builds, right? Like people who made money are the ones who started doing it. They bought these condos for 100, $200,000
sure.
and they finished and they sold it for 400. They made 200K. And you heard a little bit about that, right? And then but they have already bought in multiple condos, so they've been doing it. By the time the public was aware of what's going on, that trend is over. It's like when you hear about this drop shipping stuff on YouTube and all these things where they're talking about, oh, I make $10,000 a
Some
day
people
just
made a lot
drop
of money in the
shipping.
beginning, right?
100%. And then, but when you start hearing about it, when your neighbor starts talking to you about,
Sure.
you know, oh, I'm buying pre-con, that's when you know you got to get out of this market because
Yeah,
that's
there's a story, and I could totally butcher this story, but, you know, I think it was John D. Rockefeller who was, he was taking a cab somewhere, and, you know, the cab driver or shoe shiner, doesn't matter.
oh no, that's you're talking about um what's his name? Oh my God. I can't believe I'm losing it. Anyway, I know
Doesn't
what
matter.
story you're
Doesn't
talking about.
matter. But
Yeah,
like, when, you know, the shoe shine guy's giving you stock tips, it's like,
yeah,
oh, hey, wait a second. Frank told us that story once. Frank and
yeah,
Sam. If Sam told you that story
yeah. Frank
about
he said it in one of the meetings. He was saying it was oh man, was Buffett, Warren Buffett was getting a shoe sign. And he was telling
that,
the shoe signer was telling him, hey, you know, like this is the talk. And that's when he realized, well, if the shoe shiner is giving me advice, I got to get out of everything. And he literally got out of everything. And then, but it's the truth. It's funny. Like it's like when you start hearing from people who have no idea what they're doing and never talked about it, and they come to give you advice, hey, you got to go buy a pre-con. I'm gonna make $500,000 just
those are
by
the warning
buying this.
signals. Those are the
Those
warning
are,
signals, right?
yeah, that's when you
So
know it's over. It's over and done with.
so Sam told me a story. Um, Frank was selling a house. Him and Frank were selling a house with somebody that they knew personally, and it was, you know, it was a townhouse in a subdivision. There are a lot of direct comparables, and, you know, I think one of the recent comparables sold for something like 600, 650. And this house that they were selling was, by all accounts, it was very, very similar. But the house that they were selling backed onto a plaza. This other comparable backed onto like a park. And they listed the home. So their neighbor sold for 650 with arguably a less desirable property, or sorry, more desirable property backing onto a park.
Yeah.
They listed the property, sold it for 750. It was $100,000 over. I think this was back in 2017. And, you know, they were all excited. Like Sam said, he was all excited, and they went back into the car, and Frank looked at him and said, like, this is the sign of, this is the beginning of the end, basically, is what he said. So I think
Totally.
there's these little clues and these little red flags in the marketplace where you look at things and say, well, wait a second here, maybe things are getting a little bit too much. You can't have a market that just perpetually goes up year after year after year after year,
Yeah.
you know?
I mean, we just saw it, right? Like Durham region went up 50% from from its peak.
That's
Like
that's
in a
insane.
year, it went up 50%. And now we're
That's
down like 30 or
insane.
4, like 30%. We're still up like in the long term of things. But obviously, yeah, those people who bought in that peak, well, it's going to be tough to get that money back. You know what I mean? It's going to be a little while. Like you're probably going to be, same people who bought in 2017. Like I remember going to see houses that people who bought in 2017, and we would go into 2018, 2019, and we were seeing these prices they bought it for and they're listed for. And you're like, there's no way it's going to sell for that price. You're not going to come close. And like, sellers are just unrealistic. They're sitting on the market trying to get a little more when the last one sold for 200K from what they're asking for. And you're just like, there was a correction, but I think with the way it is, it's funny because China has a million homes of inventory too much
Vacant,
and
vacant.
vacant, just sitting there.
They have these
When we're
whole
missing,
they have these whole
yeah,
cities that they built that
just
they that
empty.
they they
Yeah,
just they imploded because
it's insane. Yeah.
they just overbuilt.
Yeah, and you come to Canada and we're missing a million homes. So it's just like imagine we could just like take them and put them here. It's just insane.
So I think CMHC came out and said we're like 22% drop off in new housing starts last year versus 2022.
Yeah.
So we're building less homes. And I think that story you told about, what happened in the Chinese market, these developers take on a lot of risk, especially these smaller developers. Some of the bigger developers, they're like bigger banks. They can just they have bigger shoulders. They can withstand if things kind of turn around a little bit. But some of these smaller developers, if you get in a situation where the market turns and you overpaid for that land, and now, all your marketing dollars, like all the money that you're putting into this is just, it just doesn't make sense financially anymore. Like
Right.
developers, I think developers take so much risk. I personally like to see some policy that, would make it more attractive to developers, whether that's by way of less taxes, some sort of special financing for developers where it's like, hey, we'll give you this incentive to build these homes under the agreement that these homes are going to get completed. So, you know,
Or like maybe they have it sold at a certain price that makes sense. I mean, I just feel like some developers they get these pieces of land for dirt cheap, and then they come around and start selling like again, like we had that instance in
there's always going to be greed that comes into it.
oh for sure. I mean that's just
That's the
normal, and
hard
that's
part.
also like greasing of the pockets, right? But I mean,
That's how the world goes around.
yeah, but I mean, remember we had that we did a little mock CMA on that property north of or a little east more of Hamilton, right? That new build that was being done, and
Oh yeah, yeah. In
like they bought it for
Caledonia.
1.1, and now we looked at it and the consensus of the group was like 800-900, right? Like that's what we kind of came up to because there was literally 20 of the same units up for sale just sitting there not moving.
Right.
So it's just insane. Like that's what's going on. Like everyone just went new build crazy. All these developers just started skyrocketing their price because they saw a trend going on. And then like I have a client who bought a property in Markham. It was supposed to be completed in 2020 and they still not done yet. And they keep delaying him 4 years.
If
It's
I was
insane.
him, I'd hope that they keep on delaying it and keep on delaying
Oh.
it and keep on delaying it.
Well, I mean, at the
Right.
time he bought it, like the prices were super low. He's still in the positive, so it's not a horrible mistake, but it's just that
So
he wants to live in his house.
all that money that's going out, and he hasn't been able to even move into his house. But that I think that's one of the problems too, is like in this perfect world scenario, sure, these developers would be incentivized, and then those pre-sales, they would go to the people that actually need them. But you know very well, most of the pre-sales are sold to investors.
Yeah,
So
the best deals, yeah,
it's
friends and
this
family.
slippery slope, and that's exactly it. Before phase one even happens, it's like family and friends, then it goes public, and then you get the leftovers. So
No, it goes like this. So it goes family and friends, and then it goes to platinum agents,
right,
and then it goes to the public. And every single time, those prices go up. So it's like the family and friends get the best deal. The
sure.
builder, hey, you're in there, you could buy 10 units for this price, no problem. And then what happens is like when they get to the second phase or third phase of that property before they like when they're going into like, okay, they break ground, right? So yeah, they open up to the public and then they break ground and then they start and then it's being completed. Then they'll all like they keep having units to sell. But when it gets close to completion, guess what units they're selling? The ones that the friends and families who bought.
Sure.
So they're already getting out of the market right when you're buying. So it's like they're not there's no risk for them. It's a
I think
guarantee.
I think the moral of the story, it, the moral of the story to me is always live within your means. Don't bite off more than you can chew. You know, when times are really, really, really great, remember when times were bad, and vice versa. You know, like don't overextend yourself. Debt can be a good instrument to build wealth long term, but too much debt can kill you. So
I think you just can't be a sheep. I think you gotta do your own research. You gotta if not everyone's buying and everyone's doing something, just because they're doing it's not a reason for you to go do it. Make sure you do your research, make sure you figure out what you need. And like David said, don't overextend. I think that's the number one thing
be
is
careful.
don't push your budget too much.
Be very
You know,
careful.
you gotta take off some wish lists, bro. Let's get you can't have four bathrooms. Three is
Cancel
enough,
your
you know what
Disney
I mean?
Plus. Cancel
Yeah,
the Disney Plus.
there you
You
go.
got you got
Disney
either
Plus.
you got any of those bored apes sitting around still?
Oh, dude, I wish. I mean, I guess not.
No, that whole market cratered, right?
I know, it's crazy,
But anyways,
crazy.
hey, appreciate you guys coming out, listening to us. Don't forget to like and subscribe.
Yeah.
And you got anything else?
No, that's it. Like and subscribe and leave some comments. We'd love to hear what you guys have to say. Like, we're always here. We'd love to get some feedback. I think we're going to start interviewing some of our agents. Maybe start with the big dog first. Maybe we'll see. Right in the next few weeks. Maybe not right away, but in the next few weeks, we're going to start talking to him about it, I think.
Sounds
Maybe
good.
we'll go from there.
All right, guys, appreciate it. We'll see you next week.
Sounds good. Later.